Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
And that's that. We can stand up and fight and ride all day through the night. We can make this change right and see our hopes and our dreams come to fruition. It's time to unite as one, calling out to our founding fathers. This is our mission to make you proud.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Humanity Awaken Radio. I'm your host, Brian Bolin, and with me as always is my co-host, Phil McNamara.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
We're really excited tonight. We have a special guest. Tonight we have Barbara Lamb. Barbara is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified hypnotherapist, and regression therapist. She maintains a psychotherapy practice in Claremont, California, and offers counseling and therapy services for individuals, couples, families, and children, covering a wide variety of concerns. She conducts hypnosis to help people achieve the changes they want to make. She specializes in regression therapy, having been trained for several years in the 1980s by the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies, APRT, which is currently called the International Association for Regression Research and Therapies. For many years, she has assisted people by conducting regression therapy, taking them to the original source of their problems and concerns, which sometimes included revisiting significant events in previous lifetimes. In 1991, Barbara began working with ET experiencers, people who have encounters with extraterrestrial beings. She has consoled and conducted regressions with more than 1,400 of these people, totaling it with 1,750 now, totaling over 3,000 regressions. 25 of these cases included in her book, Alien Experiences, which I've read, and it's incredible. A collaborative work with writer and illustrator Nadine Lalich, I believe it said, in 2008. She is a teacher in the ufology department online, International Metaphysical University. That is really cool that she does that. I did not know that. A prominent crop circle researcher since 1990, Barbara researches and conducts tours to crop circles in England each summer. She co-authored the book Crop Circles Revealed, Language of the Light Symbols, with Judith K. Moore in 2001. She is a highly sought lecturer on the subject of extraterrestrial phenomenon and on the subject of crop circle phenomenon. She has presented at many national and international conferences, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, chapters, and other widely known events. She has been interviewed for numerous films, television specials, radio programs, and internet broadcasts. And tonight we're very excited to have on the program Barbara Lamb. Barbara, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, fine, thank you.
Awesome. So we're really excited to have you
You really
here.
are. This is a really big deal for me.
Yeah, we've talked at some past conferences and lectures that you've done, and I've just been so thrilled every time to see you speak there, and I'm really excited to have you on our show to share you with our guests because the stuff that you talk about is stuff that I think humanity as a whole really needs to hear and understand. And I'd like to go into some of the things that you do with your practice with regression hypnosis, what that is, and some of the techniques that you use to help the alien abductees that you work with.
Okay. Well, it is really a wonderful field to be working in because regression therapy can be so very, very helpful. I do this as a serious venture. I mean, I consider it really part of my therapy practice. And it turns out to be very, very helpful for the people who come for these regressions. So, in regard to the extraterrestrial encounter field, a person will call and typically tell me some of the unusual things that have happened to them and things that they are perplexed about, maybe really concerned about, and maybe only remember a very few moments of one of these encounters. And maybe this has happened to the person quite a number of times over the person's lifetime, even beginning very typically early in childhood. And at a certain point in their adult years, they get to the point where they wonder, what is this? What really is going on? It seems like mysterious things are happening, and it seems like there are unusual visitors in my room at night or in other circumstances. And I only remember a little bit of it, and then I seem to be out of consciousness. And I really wonder what this is all about. And by the time they come to me, many of them have already heard about the extraterrestrial visits and encounters that are happening here to people, and then they wonder if that's what's been going on for them. Have they been actually having extraterrestrial encounters? Sometimes they really feel certain that they have, and sometimes they're very perplexed and wonder if that could be what these strange occurrences are. So they'll come, and typically we talk about it, sometimes up to an hour, about all the unusual things that they've experienced. And that very often will include having had UFO sightings, and especially when they've had very close UFO sightings. The objects have seemed to be really, close in their own vicinity rather than way up in the sky. So after talking for a while, we settle on one of the events that they've been wondering about that have happened to them, and we choose that as the focus for our regression. So then the process is that the person lies down on my sofa, typically, and I will conduct about 15 minutes of nice, deep relaxation suggestions, mentioning here and there that we're going back to the details of that particular experience that they had decided to focus on for that regression. And then at a certain point, I count from number 10 down to number 1, deepening their relaxation with each number. And then at number 1, I say, okay, you are there now. And I repeat the details that they remembered of the event they want to know more about. And I say, you are there now. And just go back to the very first awareness that you had of something unusual happening at that event. And then the person speaks out loud from this very deep state of relaxation and starts telling the first awarenesses that they're aware of. And then we just go moment by moment by moment, slowly through the whole experience, including all the material that they had not consciously known about, but that had happened in that particular encounter. So that's where most of my information about this comes from talking to people, and even more specifically, from the regressions to these extraterrestrial encounters. It is really an amazing phenomenon. I've been doing this now for 25 years and doing a lot of it, but still, I'm amazed at some of the beings and some of the experiences, some of the things that they do with people, and including some of the very positive things that these beings do with many, many people, uh, teaching them interesting things, teaching them all kinds of psychic skills, for instance, and teaching them methods of healing, which they can use back here on Earth. These teachings begin with people when they're in their very early childhood, and they're taken, they find themselves on what seems to be a craft, a UFO, and they're taken into a room where there are other human children, usually about 10 or 15 or 20 of them at the most, and also some extraterrestrial beings. So here, the person, as a little child in the regression, is taken to this circle of these children sitting on the floor, and soon the person realizes that people are in the circle, the other children, are moving things with their minds. And we call that telekinesis. And they'll start with something really, really light when they're learning a new skill like that. For instance, they'll have a little feather on the floor in the middle of the circle of the seated children, and the children take turns trying to move that feather just by thinking about moving the feather, just completely with their minds, not at all with any physical effort. And then when they can all do that task, they graduate to something a little bit heavier, like a piece of paper. And when they can move the piece of paper, all of them, they've learned that skill, then they might move up to something even a little bit heavier, like a paper clip, for instance, and so on, until they get to the point where, still as children, they can move something with their minds, like a ball in the air, kind of like throwing a ball from one child to the other across the circle, but they're not using their hands. They're only doing it with their projected thought. So that's just one example that's come out from quite a number of people in their regressions of one of the skills that that they are taught by these extraterrestrial beings. The children usually like that. I mean, it's quite an adventure. It's even more fun than going to regular school here on Earth. There are other kinds of learnings, too, for children. Whitley Strieber has written about that in his book called The Secret School. And that's a situation where a child will be awakened in the middle of the night. He's not aware of anybody there waking him up. It seems to be done remotely by the beings. So the beings have come close and they've landed their craft, their UFO, somewhere, usually outside of the residential area that the child is living in, perhaps in a woods or in a field or a meadow. And the child is awakened telepathically and instructed to get on a jacket or something and leave the house and get on a bicycle and ride to that particular place where the craft and the beings are waiting. And in that location, the child will find that there are many other children coming in too from different parts of town, and they're all ushered into a circle in the woods or the field or wherever this is happening, or onto the craft sometimes. And then they are taught things by the extraterrestrial beings. At the end of this session, shall we say, the teaching session, each of these children will get back on their bicycles and ride back to their own homes and go back into bed just as normal. And usually they will forget that they have actually done that they've actually had that experience. But maybe many years later, they'll have little flashbacks about being in the woods or sitting in a circle with the other children or being with the unusual beings, or they might remember spontaneously some part of the learning that they were given and wondered, how did I know that? Where did that come from? These things are very typical for these people who experience this sort of thing. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes, usually in their adult years, they'll want to have a regression and find out. So a person might come wondering about a specific incident, or maybe a more global question like, why do I have the feeling that I know other beings from somewhere else? Or why do I feel like I have a connection with other planets or other stars? Or why is it that I keep seeing UFOs and the other people I know don't see those UFOs, but I keep seeing them? Or they'll have flashbacks to a particular incident on board a spacecraft that's already happened, and they'll wonder about that. Where did that image come from? And many people come because they keep having dreams of this sort, of being with these unusual beings. And the dreams seem very real, but after all, the person is in bed sleeping. And so when they wake up with a memory of this dream, they think, oh, it must have been a dream because I was just sleeping. Whereas actually, as it turns out, when we regress to one of those unusual dreams, it will turn out to be a whole full-blown encounter experience. So when people come to me and say, gee, I don't know if that was a dream or if it was something else, I will always say, well, if it was just a dream, and we do a regression to what you remember of the dream, and that's all that comes up, that's all there is to it, then I think we can safely assume it really was just a dream. However, if it was an actual encounter that you're doing the regression to, it will play out. The whole incident from the beginning to the end will play out way beyond what the person can possibly remember consciously.
I actually did a group regression at Contact in the Desert last year, and
Ah,
yeah, Yvonne was hosting it, and it was pretty wild. I mean, out of the whole room, there's probably 300 to 400 people there, and myself and 2 or 3 other people had an experience. Mine was pretty intense. I mean, I was completely shaking, almost convulsing, like during it because it was so intense for me. I focused in on a memory I had right before I saw a craft fly over my car, and I think we spoke about this a little bit last time we talked, but and
yes.
and and then I had a dream from a couple months ago that came up. That was the all of a sudden everything went black, and then that dream came up right after the car situation, and the whole. I thought the dream was during the day, but what I found in the regression was that there was a light coming from the sky that was so bright that I thought it was the daytime, but it was actually nighttime, and I was being pulled up into the craft. And
Oh, yeah. In fact, that's very common. Many people experience that. It's so bright that they don't even see beyond that light.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, everyone in the audience could kind of tell that I was having some kind of experience. I mean, my whole body started shaking as if I was like being pulled up into it and not having control over my body, which was pretty wild. But
Oh, yeah.
um, but that's all that it was given to me from what Yvonne said. There's something called like a curtain, I think is the word she used, where like that's all my mind wanted me to remember at that time.
Okay, well, you see, in a group situation like that, you cannot get the individual attention.
Hmm.
You cannot be individually guided through the experience. So I think group regressions can be very interesting, kind of like an introduction. And I've participated in group regressions myself, both as somebody being regressed as part of the group and also in conducting the regressions of a group. And I have found some very interesting information in the regressions I've participated in, that's for sure. But it's not nearly as complete and wonderful an experience as when you're individually guided through. And that if you get into any fear sort of situation, the person doing the regression, the therapist conducting it, can really help you through those times and help to bring out more and more details, help you through the whole experience.
That's pretty
So I can,
powerful. I mean, because
yeah.
I know you said you do Skype regressions. I was thinking it might be kind of wild to do a live Skype regression for the podcast. Not tonight, but maybe another time. That might be kind of cool to do that.
That would be awesome.
Oh, would that be possible?
It would be possible.
Absolutely.
We would do the Skype call just like we're doing right now and then record it.
Okay, just with the visual.
We could do
Yeah.
visual too, yeah.
Yeah, I like to, when possible, I like to see the person because I like to see how they're reacting, that maybe they're not saying a lot of indication that they're having difficulty or concerned or even very happy. But I'd like to see that on them. Also, in during the induction part of the regression, which is the relaxation for several minutes at the beginning of the regression process, I like to see the person's breathing. And when they seem to be having really nice, long, slow, deep, rhythmic breathing, and their face looks very relaxed, then I know that they're in a deep enough state of consciousness so that it's time to actually begin the details of the event that they want to explore in the regression. So if it's just audio, um, I'm doing a little bit of guessing there.
We could definitely do video.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
that would be great. I love the
Yes.
fact that you're talking about the positive experiences that people are having, because we always hear about all the negative stuff that comes out of regressions and comes out of alien or extraterrestrial,
Encounters.
encounters. I don't like the word abductions, but I like the word
Yeah.
encounters. And the
Me
fact
too.
that you're bringing forth this sort of really positive thing, because we just don't hear about that enough, and it's kind of sad because people get the wrong impression of what is happening, and it's such a vast phenomenon all over the world that not everybody is being harmed in some fashion. A lot of people are being taught a lot of these, especially with children, and they're not, and I think it's wonderful that you're talking about that. Thank you for doing that.
On to
Well, thank you. I'm so pleased that you mentioned that. That's something I try to always bring out when I'm speaking with people, either individually or publicly, that I can really understand totally why it could be very, very frightening to wake up in the middle of the night and see your room filled with light or sparkles of light or a big beam of light, and maybe or maybe not hear sort of a humming noise of some sort outside, and then seeing beings in the room and being drawn out of the room, levitated up out of the bed and taken across the room and through a wall or through the ceiling or through a closed window. We don't really know how they do this, but they do it with us, and it happens to our bodies. And then usually they don't remember consciously what happened after that. But I can totally appreciate why that is a subject that could be treated very, very fearfully. And I think that a lot of the public media treats the whole extraterrestrial phenomenon as bad and evil and frightening and dangerous and threatening. And we just can think of some of the movies that have come out, some of the television specials, where people are just terrified and the beings seem so perfectly nasty
I have a
and
theory
horrible.
about that, and I'm pretty sure it's because when we have disclosure, whether it's partial or full disclosure, we're going to have a subconscious distrust towards these other ETs, and I think that our government or secret government can definitely play into that subconscious fear, and I think they have been kind of capitalizing on that.
Right, I think so too. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but well, it may be not just the government either, but the people who provide the movies and the media, they like to create sensation. They like to sell a lot of their movies, obviously, and drama and fear really sells to the public. And we've seen that again and again with all kinds of negative stuff being publicly put out there in all media, and horror films, for instance, and war films, and aliens invading from space. And, let's face it, there's a lot of humanity that really likes to go and be scared. In fact, terrified. I'm not one of them, as it turns out, but but many, many people are like that, and they'll go to one really scary thriller after the other, and it sells. So of course they're going to make it. So I think some of it is sort of for commercial profit, and maybe there's some uh, government influence behind it, trying to create fear about the whole phenomenon. I really don't know, but I think that's a possibility.
Well, let me ask you this. Based on what you've been doing, what kind of beings are people reporting they're being interacted with?
Well, there are certain major types, and then there are some types that I hear about only once from one person. First of all, I'd like to say that there probably are about 60 or 70 different types of beings that have come through these regressions that I've done. And some of them we're more familiar with because they seem to come to more people and seem to come so often. For instance, I think we've all heard about the little gray beings, allegedly from Zeta Reticuli. And they very often are the ones who do medical checkups and medical procedures on people on board the UFO. And so they're very typical. The little grays with the big almond shaped eyes and kind of pale grayish sort of skin, big heads, little chins, little necks, spindly little bodies, no hair. Just the typical little ET figure that is promoted a lot. You see it a lot on different things. So that's very, very common. Also, many people are having experiences with the mantis beings, uh, or sometimes people call them the praying mantis beings because they look very much like a praying mantis insect, except that they're really very tall. They're usually about 7.5 or 8 or even more feet tall, and they have huge eyes. They have an extra appendage on their arm that sort of folds over. And they could look very scary because they're so big, look like a huge insect. But actually, in all of the regressions I've done with people who've had experiences with mantis beings, they consistently are very likable, even lovable, um, very often described as exuding unconditional love. I mean, that is really something. So they're very kindly, they're patient. I've known of a couple of cases where a mantis being has interacted with a little human child, and they're very playful and they're very sweet, kind of like a very loving grandparent. And even though they are so hugely tall and thin and bug looking, that the child will usually realize, oh, this is a nice friend. This is a very nice, gentle being. It's okay. So those two types. And then we have many of the other types who are different heights, but look very much like the small grays, although they may have a somewhat different skin color. They may be about 5'5" or 5'7". They may have sort of beige skin or very dark skin, or even some of those who were that size and look like the gray type actually have white skin. There are also some very likable little beings who are very short, probably 3.5 or 4 feet tall at the most, and they come and take some people to whatever the experience is going to be on the spacecraft. So they'll come right into the room and usually come in the form of sparkles of light, sort of doing circles and spirals in the air of the room. And then after a while, they will sort of coalesce together and land on the floor and somehow turn into these 3 little white beings. One of my clients, whom I worked with for 11 years, again and again had her experiences start with the three little white guys, as she called them, and she thought they were darling and they were sweet. And she and her sister, who shared the bedroom all through their growing up years and would see these little beings too, they just loved them. And one of the sisters, who was my client, was typically, after a minute or two, would be taken out through the wall by the little beings and then taken to the ship and then having encounters with the other beings on the ship. So it seemed like these three little white guys were the transporters, the little escorts, taking the person to the rest of the experience. And then we have some of the extraterrestrial beings who look very human. And very often they look like Scandinavian people with blonde hair and blue eyes and very, very attractive from a human point of view. And typically people tend to call them Nordics because they remind them of Scandinavians. They're really not human, but they have a very, very human looking form. And then we have a whole category of beings which we call reptilians. And they look like big, well muscled, buff, athletic looking beings, both male and female, who have a very different kind of skin, a much more textured skin with a variation of coloring, usually a darker coloring, greens and browns and so forth. And they have usually very, very bright eyes, round eyes in this case, and usually vertical pupils rather than round pupils and irises, such as we have. And I have come to realize over these years that there must be several different species of reptilians. Some of them seem to be more self-serving, more arrogant, more interested in having sex with humans, and some are more like teachers, guides, coaches. Well, there are just several different kinds that have come into my attention from doing these regressions. But again, humans tend to put out there in the public that all reptilians are just, really to be feared. They're just awful. And some of them may be more frightening, to be sure. But some of them are very nice. They make nice companions, actually, for people who are taken to the spaceships. And then there are many other types too, like there are tall, blue-skinned beings who seem to be very spiritually oriented, the blue Arcturian beings, and tall, white Zeta beings, and Andromedan beings, and Syrian beings, and Lyran beings, to just name a few. And then beyond that, there are many beings who don't say in the regression, do not indicate, what they are called or where they are from. They just simply do whatever they are intending to do with the human who's having this experience. And, they don't say much, but they will, just kind of keep quiet and go about their business and accomplish what they want to. And then there are some beings who are really glowing, very high-minded, high, probably other dimensional beings who seem to be very high spiritual beings. they're always described as exuding unconditional love to the people who have the encounters with them. Quite a number of those different types of beings have come across the regressions that I've done. In fact, one of them from one woman was so bright and dazzling on the spaceship that when she was taken to the spaceship by other beings and set there on her feet, this being was there so dazzling and bright and radiant that she had to shield her eyes, but she knew it was really good. She was awestruck in that positive way, in that spiritual way. And she got down on her knees and genuflected and did the sign of the cross. She was raised Catholic, so that was a natural way for her to show her reverence. And then that being started talking to her and telling her that she had long ago been one of them and that they are 11th dimensional beings, and that she had had many lifetimes as one of them, and then had at a certain point volunteered or accepted the assignment to come to planet Earth and live as a human being so that those higher dimensional beings could know what human life on Earth was like through her. So she, of course, was totally amazed and had not remembered anything of that sort. I think it's interesting as a side note, too, to say that this radiant being told her that she had been here for 6 human lifetimes in a row, one right after the other, and that the original intention was that she would come for one lifetime as a human. But this being said that unfortunately, once a human comes to Earth, or once a soul comes to Earth as a human, the human gets stuck in what is called residue. By that, he meant karma. So she had come to her first incarnation on Earth and built up some karma, and therefore, after dying, had to reincarnate again as another human to clear up the karma. But each time she came to be a human, she built up more karma. So this being knew all of this and told her this, and even gave her the fantastic gift, in my opinion, the gift of telling her what her karmic or residue, as he said, karmic issues were. So that if she wanted to become an 11th dimensional being again, she could really use the rest of this lifetime to clear up those karmic issues. And then, after death, she would not have to reincarnate here again. She could go back to being an 11th dimensional being. Wasn't that an incredible gift to give somebody?
That's an incredible gift.
Yeah,
I
yes.
you know, it's stunning to me. I had a regression therapy done many years ago, and was told then I can't remember the name of the woman that did it, but I wish I could find her again. But she really gave me an amazing gift too. She took me back. She said, her quote was, "You were one of the old ones."
Oh, okay.
And she took me back and she told me that I've done over 50 lives on this planet alone, and she couldn't even see how far back I went.
Aha.
And so I have sort of conscious memory um my original life, which was like in the early part of the formation of this universe.
Wow.
So I know that I've been around a very long time.
Oh, I should say so. I assume that's a very, very long time. You know, that's a really excellent thing that you experienced. And I imagine we will be talking about the hybrid people who are living here on Earth eventually in this interview. But I will jump ahead to say that one of the hybrids whom I know is able to give what she calls a star origin reading. And a star origin reading is one in which she can psychically see where a person very, very originally incarnated. She gave me a star origin reading, and she said that my first several incarnations were not really on Earth or on a planet of any type, but were in what she called a celestial realm. In other words, very high dimensional, non physical realm of light and love. I mean, it just sounds like an idyllic kind of state of being. So, and then after several of those lifetimes, I began to incarnate on different planets as other types of beings, which we call extraterrestrial beings. I'm sure they don't call themselves extraterrestrial, but that's our name for them. And then ultimately, eventually, after a long time, started having Earth incarnations as a human. What a wonderful experience that must have been for you.
It really truly was. I was it changed the course of my life. It really did. And
Oh, yes. Wow. Very inspiring, I should imagine.
it really was. And what she did say to me, she said is that every lifetime that she could see that I was participating in, all the way back to the first one here, which was as a helper to one of the priests of Atlantis. Um,
Wow.
she said, "You've always been a helper. You've never. That's every incarnation you've ever had. You've always been some sort of like helping profession or helping. Um, you're there. You've accumulated enough, amassed enough. I guess lifetimes and experience to be able to really see through people and see what their potential is and guide them toward their greatest good." Uh,
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so that was a really an extraordinary thing to say.
Oh, it really is. And I can believe it too.
Mm.
I'm very open to that. And no doubt you are serving really nicely in this lifetime too.
Yeah, I am actually. I found my niche a while back, and I've sort of gone with it, and I sort of let the universe sort of guide me in whatever direction it wanted to, and I don't question it anymore. I said, "This is this for me?" And if it is, it continues. If it isn't, it goes away.
Phil and I have both committed to this lifetime being our final incarnation in this density, and
Okay.
we're definitely just both committed to the spiritual and soul growth that needs to occur in order to get one step closer back to source.
Okay, wonderful. And by doing this program too, I'm certainly seeing that it is a service in itself because you're very open to hearing the wonderful ideas, the positive aspect of all of this, and to really open up to the scope of the cosmos and the different dimensions of reality and the goodness that is in all of this. this is just so different than what we hear in most of the media, which at best seems to be kind of frivolous comedy or relationship information, relationship dynamics, which can be, interesting certainly and good to us humans. But then all that fear, adventure, disaster, destructive sort of stuff that's out there in the media. And thank goodness for you too, Brian and Phil, for bringing something else to the public. That's really excellent.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Barbara, for that. That's really nice of you to say that. We
Oh, yeah.
appreciate your work that you're doing.
Absolutely.
You've woken me up more than you know, Barbara.
Oh,
I gotta say that this is probably one of my number one passions in this field, this area of the ET phenomenon is a lot of stuff that you've done with your work is the ET encounters, alien abductions, like these kind of things. Like, to me, this is the closest thing that we have to understanding what's really going on in the interaction between us and off-world civilizations, as well as possible higher density beings. Before we
yes.
before we move on from this subject, for some of our audience who might not be aware, in your words, what is regression hypnosis, and the whole background for how that works and you getting information from the subconscious?
Well, as I was saying earlier, regression is a matter of choosing something that you would like to know more about and then going into a nice state of deep relaxation, um, being guided, hopefully, by somebody who is trained in this field and knows what to do and has a therapeutic intent. And then the person is taken back to an incident or to knowing an answer that they want to know about. And it comes through very slowly, moment by moment by moment, through a whole experience. And I got my training, as you had mentioned earlier, through 5 years of training with the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies. And so for several years, I was focusing mostly on doing regressions into the source of a person's issue, which very often took us back into a previous lifetime, if that's where the person's issue in this lifetime began. And that was very rich and wonderful work. I still do quite a bit of that work too, past life regression therapy. But then in 1991, it got into the whole field of people having these extraterrestrial encounters. So in past life therapy, we go back to whatever the person's issue is, that is, to whatever originally caused that issue to remain with the person. And the source of that issue could be earlier in this life. So, therefore, that's a this life regression. Or the source of a person's problem these days could be in a previous lifetime. And we never know until we're in that regression. We'd have no idea what's going to come up. The big point about regression is that all of the material, all of the images, feelings, thoughts, knowings come from the person who's being regressed. Now, this is very different than a psychic reading by somebody else who tells you what she or he sees psychically for that person. Um, so a lot of people feel that they can really trust and believe more thoroughly the material that came up from their selves during regression than they could in hearing it from another person. I think you can see the distinction there.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
something that I've always been really interested in um, is the possibility that, the more and more that I research, abduction accounts, the more and more I start to think, I'm thinking that there's a lot more people who don't realize that they've had an experience. And I wanted to
Oh,
ask you, how many people do you think are having ET experiences they're not consciously aware of? Like, if you were to make like a ballpark figure, would it be like 3 out of 10 people or 7 out of 10 people?
oh boy, that's a difficult question because it is a worldwide phenomenon.
It is.
Yeah, so of course I'm totally guessing. I would guess that out of 10, there may be 4 people, let's say, hypothetically.
That's still a pretty
Um,
high number, and that's what I was
yeah,
assuming it would be too.
yeah, 4 people, let's say, who've had experiences like this. Some people have extraterrestrial encounters very frequently, um, and they have all of their lifetimes. Um, and some people have them just once in a while, like maybe once a year or once every 2 years or every few years. I think it depends on the beings who are working with those people and how often they need to see them. I want to really be sure to emphasize that there is so much good that people find so often in these regressions. Like I told you about being taught psychic skills and telekinesis and being taught how to heal people. Well, in addition to that, many people find in these regressions that they have actually been healed themselves by the extraterrestrial beings in some of these experiences. Even being healed of really serious things like severe heart problems, lung problems, kidney problems, cancer. Broken bones will heal up remarkably fast if healing is applied by one of these extraterrestrial beings. All kinds of things like that go on, and very often the person who, of course, is living here on Earth and going to human doctors, they may be just totally puzzled, like, how did that broken leg heal up so fast? Or how did that kidney problem, which was just about to be operated on, how did that kidney problem suddenly become completely well?
Or how did
Or,
this person get pregnant without having intercourse? Which I know happens
oh,
a lot
yes.
in these
Oh,
situations.
you are right, Brian. Yes. Oh,
uh,
that's one of the great aspects of this phenomenon. And that happens to many, many, many women who, some of them do know that they're having these visits with extraterrestrial beings, and some of them just don't even know. I can't tell you how many people I talk to by telephone and meet at conferences and who send emails of people who've had a whole series of unusual experiences, and sometimes these unusual pregnancies that suddenly disappear after 2 or 2.5 months or so, and yet they put that together with other little hints, and it may take years and years, decades of their lives to put that all together with, wow, maybe I'm having those experiences that I'm beginning to hear about. And, it's in a way we could say it's a very covert program going on with extraterrestrial beings coming here and taking people.
Which I'm sure leads into the hybrid phenomenon as well.
Yeah, but with the sort of covertness of the program, um, it has been said in regressions that I have witnessed, it been said by the beings that they do this in a very covert, hidden way as much as possible to not disturb the human beings. They know that human beings are really, really emotional. We go into fear, we can go into hysteria, we can, really be very, very disturbed by thinking of being approached and maybe even taken away by some of these unusual beings. So they try to not have the person know about that as much as possible. However, even try as they might to be really secretive about this, um, people do discover lots of little hints, bits and pieces that something unusual has happened. I cannot tell you how many people have talked to me. They've had unusual bruises on their body, not like they've been beaten up, but just like little fingertip bruises on their arms or on their legs, or they have little pinprick looking marks in a straight line or in a perfect circle, or they'll have a triangular bruise mark on their body or a straight line white scar.
This is where we get into where people never say that there's physical evidence. I mean, what you're describing right now is physical evidence as long as it can be documented in soon enough time before it heals, correct?
Yes, and fortunately, many people are taking photos of these little markings. Also, there are implants that are put in, little objects that are put in by the other beings, and a person will feel a little bump under the skin. It doesn't seem to hurt, and there's no scar left. They have amazing technology, it seems, these beings.
Also, it has
And
no inflammatory reaction, which I think is very crucial with the implant phenomenon, understanding that the body will react to a foreign object being put inside it, and the people who have these implants don't seem to have any inflammatory reaction.
You're right. And I think a reason for that is that before the object is implanted in the person, on a previous occasion, a little scoop of tissue has been taken from the person by the beings, and they keep that, and then they seem to bond that person's tissue to the little object, the implant, and put that back in the person's body. And because it's the person's own tissue, the body does not reject it or does not become inflamed or infected or anything. The body accepts it.
That is
And so
incredible. That's the whole link between the scoop marks and the implants. I've never put those together.
yes, I think that is a direct link as far as we can see, and so it's very clever. They have wonderful ways of doing these things. You probably have heard of the excellent work done by Dr. Roger Lear.
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure of
Yeah.
meeting and talking with him multiple occasions.
Oh, me too. Yes, he was a friend, and I went to 3 of the implant removal sessions he did in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And he and his colleagues, other surgeons as well, um, did quite a number of implant removals, 17 different implant removals that I know of. Maybe he did more after that. And he kept them and he sent them off to one laboratory after the other and to get an analysis. And they always came up with the fact that the implants, although they're very tiny, about the size of a sunflower seed heart or a BB, so that's pretty small, but nevertheless, lab analysis showed that they were made up of a series of metals all fused together. And some of those metals were metals that we have on Earth, and usually one or two of the metals in the implant were found to be substances that we do not know about here on Earth, probably are not existing here on Earth.
The last lecture I saw Roger do actually with his assistant at the Conscious Life Expo about 2 years ago, they said the latest analysis said that some of those metals were actually found on Mars.
Wow, yeah. So you see that is excellent evidence.
It's the best physical evidence we have, and it needs to be taken seriously. For our audience who is hearing this for the first time, go on YouTube and search Dr. Roger Lear, and there's some great video out there of where you can see him removing these implants and doing his procedure. And this needs to be talked about more. Barbara, before we take a quick break, I wanted to bring up, I don't know if you've heard this. Do you know who Daryl Sims is?
Yes, I do know Daryl. Mm-hmm.
One of the interviews I heard Daryl do a couple months back, where he is really getting into wanting to find more physical evidence when we have encounters with these beings. And something that I found so fascinating with what he did is that when the beings leave 2 finger marks on someone's either neck or shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
if you bring an ultraviolet light, some kind of UV light, and shine it next to the mark, you will actually see it light up with the residue. I don't know if you've heard that or not.
Yes. Oh, definitely. In fact, I do know a man in Southern California, where I live, who uses a black light on anybody who would like to be scanned with that. And he finds on people who experience extraterrestrial encounters, he very often finds, kind of a glowing area of color here and there on that person's body. And he postulates that that area, which doesn't show up in the regular light, but does show under a black light, that it is from extraterrestrial physical contact with that person. So I've seen that on many people, or it'll be in the house of the person too, maybe on the bed or on the carpet in the bedroom, if a person's been taken from the bedroom, or on the bedclothes. And I've seen it on people's arms and shoulders and necks and legs and hands and all kinds of places. Sometimes the marking shows up kind of like a neon yellow or a beautiful neon blue or a turquoise. I've seen those colors showing up, and those are people who I know, because they're my clients. They are experiencing extraterrestrial contact. Yeah, so that's very useful. A lot of people like to be checked. A lot of people who suspect that they might be having these experiences will check. Now, I don't know how long that fluorescence, he calls it, I don't know how long the fluorescent, that light portion on the skin, will last. But if it's been a fairly recent encounter that the person has had, it shows up quite brightly under the black light.
Wow, that's amazing. I'd actually never even heard that. That's new information for me. I'm stunned by that. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's the next level of research in this field, and I'm really excited that we're sharing it with our guests right now. I mean, with our audience right now. Barbara, why don't we take a quick break,
Okay.
and we'll reconvene in a couple minutes, okay?
Great. That'll be fine.
Alrighty, we'll see you back in a little bit. Awesome. So, are you all set to go for the next portion?
I I am. Yeah, I really like the way you're conducting this.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
you seem to both be involved in it and know a lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of live and breathe it in a healthy way, though. I would say, we're not. It's not like we're so deep in it that we're paranoid. It's like we've gone so deep in the rabbit hole and like floated back out, and like and we can go into reality and into the conspiracy reality and everything in between and when we want to. So
Uh-huh. Well, I think it's just great that you're bringing this out to whatever part of the public will actually hear it.
mm, yes, I agree. And for some reason, like we're saying, like we're attracting new listeners to these topics, and I really do think we're doing it in a way where we're bypassing cognitive dissonance, and people are very genuinely interested and wanting more information, which is great.
Yes, we are the disclosure.
That's
Yes.
right.
And I think
I like
that's
that.
important and also because we're trying to create something, a different voice and a different take on this, so that people can see that, and it's not all scary, and that there is science behind it, and that there is, there's something to be gained from this as we move into a post-disclosure world, which I'm hoping will be very soon. We can the rhetoric around, if we can't get along with each other on this planet, what's going to happen when we have to deal with, hundreds of different races that,
Oh,
I can't even imagine.
Speaking
I
of the
know.
different races and disclosure and all this, have you actually had any regressions with people talking about, what Corey Good has been talking about and his message and blue avians and um, the upside down golden triangle head beings and like this kind of stuff, which Phil and we follow everything that he's been talking about. I don't know if you've been keeping up with it or not.
No, no, I'm not familiar with that.
This is the first time you're hearing about it?
I've heard his name, but
Okay.
I haven't heard the other things you've said.
Okay. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So out of all the 60 different beings that you said that you've people have talked about in regressions, you haven't once heard about blue avians or well, have any of them talked about blue avians?
Well, a couple of my hybrid people talk about blue Arcturians. I don't know if those are the same.
Hmm.
The blue Arcturians are very, they might be partly other dimensional, but they are very, very benevolent, very unconditionally loving, and very caring about Earth. Now, is that typical of the blue avians you're mentioning?
It sounds almost identical. But one little detail that it's very similar to what you're saying about the blue Arcturians is that um, according to Corey, the blue avians chose that physical form to look, kind of like a feathered bird with a bird beak and a bird head and a human body with blue feathers. That's the form that they chose to be viewed in by humans at this time, and
Oh,
their message is one of like preparing us for kind of like for the positiveness of harvest and this kind of things of like kind of like the law of one teachings, and that their teachings seem to really line up with the law of one. And what are some of your regressions and clients talking about this time period and ascension or harvest or any of those kind of things going on right now? Is that a pretty standard topic?
well, ascension is a very big topic amongst the hybrid people I know. These are ET human hybrids. Maybe this is a good time to get
Let's
into
get into it. Yeah, this is
that
great.
subject. Yeah. Well, I'd like to introduce this by saying that for 23 years or so, I was finding in many of these regressions that people who were having these encounters with extraterrestrials were also having hybrid babies. And that could be experienced by our human women and also by our human men. And in 2011, I believe it was, or maybe 2010, I was asked to give a major lecture at the National MUFON Symposium about ET human hybrids. So at that point, I looked back through my many, many cases and realized, well, not realized, but pulled out details about many, many people's experiences of being impregnated with a hybrid embryo and then having that taken out and raised as a hybrid baby in a gestation tank on board the UFOs. And then those hybrid babies were quote unquote born. In other words, developed enough to be taken out of the gestation tanks and wrapped up in swaddling clothes like we do and raised as babies, and then they developed into children, hybrid children, and on into adulthood. So I was aware of lots of people having encounters with their own hybrid babies and hybrid children and hybrid young adults. I thought that was as far as it went. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I was standing at a refreshment kiosk at one of the international UFO congresses, and a woman came up along beside me, and I looked to see who was there, and I did a double take. And as I looked at her eyes, her bigger than usual, beautiful eyes, and she could see that I was startled, and she said, "What?" And like, "Why are you looking at me that way?" And I said, "Well, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but you remind me of a hybrid." And she smiled and said, "I am a hybrid." So that woman is named Cynthia Crawford. I'm not telling tales out of school because she is doing some public speaking about her being a hybrid. And anyway, I got to know her. And a couple of years later, another woman at one of these conferences was brought over to be introduced to me. And I looked at her and immediately thought, she is a mantis being. And although she looks like a human being, but I just had that sudden knowing. And I told her, "You remind me of a mantis being." And she smiled and she said, "Good for you. I am a mantis being. I'm from planet Estegan." Well, I got to know that woman quite well because she spent nearly a week with me from across the country.
Barbara, real
And
quick, would you call that an intuitional feeling, or do you feel like that's kind of a psychic gift that you've been given to kind of seek those things out?
well, I had not even had the thought in my mind to look for any hybrids who would be living here. I didn't think any could live here. It just was not in my framework of thinking at all. So I think it was, well, I just call it a sudden knowing. I guess you call it intuition.
Or
I,
synchronicity?
yeah, I don't consider myself being particularly psychic, but those were very strong, immediate hits.
Hmm.
In other words, intuitions, and they happen to be right. So along about that same time, with the second hybrid, within a few months there, I somehow met another woman who lives in Kentucky, and she claims to be a reptilian hybrid. And I got to know her, and she sent me paintings that she had done of some reptilian facilities, like a reptilian temple that's here on Earth underground. And I found her very interesting. She sent me a couple of pictures of her beginning to shapeshift into her reptilian self. And then by that time, I was aware that these other two hybrids, whom I was keeping in touch with, that they had occasions when they would shapeshift into their extraterrestrial beings that they are partly composed of. So that's kind of how it was. I knew those three and thought, well, I'll hope I'll meet some others. I didn't know that I would do anything with it, particularly after that MUFON lecture. But the International UFO Congress wanted me to speak about that, and which I did. A few months later, I think that was 2012, and then people from the audience, a few of them, came up one by one and said, well, I'm wondering if I am a hybrid. And if we did a regression, those people and I, one by one, we sometimes found out that, yes, indeed, they were hybrids. So this was just one of the many very interesting, wonderful things that were cooking around in my consciousness when in 2015, I was approached by a wonderful man, researcher, writer in England named Miguel Mendonça, and he wanted to talk about ET human hybrids. He had on his own become very, very interested in that subject and had heard a couple of lectures on YouTube that I had given about hybrids. Well, make a long story short, in April 2015, we decided to collude or collaborate on writing a book about hybrids. And that book is published now and is available on Amazon.com. And it's called Meet the Hybrids by Miguel Mendonça and myself, Barbara Lamb. So in preparing to write the book, we interviewed 8 people, some of whom I already knew, and some of whom were referred by the hybrids I knew. And so we had 8 hybrids, and we spent quite a number of hours with each one on 2 or 3 different occasions, interviewing them on Skype with the visual, and gathered lots of material and had them write up some of their own material. And we published it in this book, Meet the Hybrids. So these hybrids are people who look like people, and they were born from human mothers and fathers, and they've lived their whole lives on Earth. But they do have a good amount of extraterrestrial genetics in them, and they have lifelong, ongoing contacts with the type of beings whose genetics they have. So that's how I've learned about some of these beings, like the tall white Zetas and the Lyrans and the blue Arcturians, because those are some of the species that are involved with these hybrids. And it's been the most wonderful privilege to know these people. They are excellent people. They certainly appear and seem very normal as human beings, and they have these unusual experiences, and they all have wonderful, wonderful abilities, which they are using here to help humanity. They all have a very strong sense of mission, that they are here, created by the extraterrestrials and humans. And they are here to really give service to humanity, to upgrade the consciousness and awareness of humanity. So, in other words, the extraterrestrial beings who help to create these hybrids, they have been very concerned about planet Earth, and particularly about what human beings are doing to each other and how we are harming the Earth itself. So they realize that we really need upgrading, we really need inspiration. And part of this is that the other beings would like to see Earth itself and humanity to ascend. In other words, to go into a higher dimension, probably the fifth dimension. For people hearing this for the first time, that may sound quite baffling, and it did to me too for a while. But you see, we on planet Earth and we humans are a very dense frequency. We're in a very dense physical dimension. Things are slower and harder here in this third dimension. And many of these other beings live in somewhat higher dimensions where everything is easier. It's not so dense and physical. There's some physicality to it, but it's a lighter physicality. And in these other frequencies, the beings do so much better. They're more cooperative. They're more loving. They treat their own planets, their own environment, so much better than we do. Their understanding of getting along is so much better than ours is. Many of these species have gone through times, thousands of years ago, maybe even millions of years ago, where they were more warmongering and competing and aggressive, like so much of humanity is. But they have gotten through that. They've evolved for a longer time than they say that we have as humans on Earth. And they know that there's a better way to be, a better way to live, a better way to treat each other, a better way to treat our planets. And so they are really here trying to help us. So, of course, these other beings would not be received well. I'm sure that's true if they came down and lived here and worked here themselves and tried to exert a positive influence. So, therefore, they have taken humans and treated them to being hybrid beings. Or in many cases, they have created embryos, which are partly their species of extraterrestrials and maybe mostly human, and implanted those embryos in the uterus of a human woman so that she could carry and nurture and give birth to and raise one of these hybrid beings here as a human being.
That's just
so incredible.
amazing. And I've always suspected that they were here, and it's so nice to get confirmation that they are, because I know that we need a lot of help on this planet. It's clear that we're having some challenges, and
Yes.
and I'm really hoping that there seems to be a lot of people incarnating onto the planet right now. I always look at little kids, and I met this girl. I'll just tell this story real quickly. I met this girl at the Conscious Life Expo a couple of years ago, And I took one look at her, and I thought she had the biggest blue eyes I've ever seen in a little girl, and she had this gorgeous brown, like
One of my neighbors is like that.
yeah,
Their little girl, yeah.
little curly hair. And I asked her what her name was, and she told me her name was Cyriline, which I've never heard that name before. And her mother said to me, she goes, I don't know. And I said, I just got the sense. I said, can I ask her a few questions? And she said, sure. And she said, and I looked at her and I said, where are you from? And she pointed straight up into the sky.
Oh, yes. Well, she's probably one of those star children. She may be a hybrid. I think there are more hybrids living here than we have any realization of. And I think there are more star children. Star children, according to the hybrids, are not actually hybrids, but they are people who've been sent by, in a sense, and are inspired by some of these very enlightened extraterrestrial beings. And they are really here also to help humanity. And there are star children appearing, fortunately, all over the earth. That's a specialty that some people study more than I have. I am very aware of them, however. And I did participate a few years ago in a workshop that was held for star kids out here in the California desert at the Integraton, which is a very special place. And there are workshops that are held for them here and there throughout the United States and hopefully through other countries too, to encourage these children to really get on with their work that they're here to do, their missions, and to really practice and use their special abilities, their psychic abilities, their intuition, their healing skills, and so forth, their telepathic way of being able to communicate with each other. So I think it's very helpful and encouraging to know that we do have these star kids who will grow up and do a lot of good in the world. And there are the hybrids who are here kind of quietly, without a whole lot of fanfare, really working to help humanity.
So, Barbara, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a moment. I'm a big John Keel fan. I've read the Mothman Prophecies over 5 times, and I know that you've had the opportunity to speak with him before, correct?
Yes.
And he's a very big proponent of he wants to almost like debunk the phenomenon, but not. Like, he wants to figure out the source of what all this really means behind the scenes, and I admire that. And it's always kind of kept my investigative journalism hat on the way that he does without this, to keep me grounded in this whole phenomenon. And he, in the Mothman Prophecies, he talks a lot about how these saviors or the hybrid people or the star people, have been coming and saying that we need to come together to stop a cataclysm from happening, and our world needs help, and we're here to help, and this is how we're going to do it, and we need you contactees to help us do this so that we can accomplish this. So, and then nothing happens. And just to kind of play devil's advocate, like, what's different about this time period? What's going on right now? Why you think some of these hybrids are coming forward, and you're having these synchronicities, meeting them, and what's the message about what's going on right now and what time period we're in? I have a feeling it has something to do with like what I was talking about earlier, about like the harvest or ascension.
Yes, well, I think things are really moving along in a very interesting way, a very important way, actually. And we see a lot of negativity going on in the world, that's for sure. But we also see some very positive things happening, like the star kids, the hybrids, other regular humans who are really working hard to improve things. There certainly is that going on. And people like the two of you, Brian and Phil, putting on these programs and sharing information, really opening up people's minds or expanding them further if they're quite a bit open already. You're investigating, you're open, you're educating people, you're really enlarging the consciousness of people. And that's one of the wonderful things. Thank goodness for our technological geniuses, and so much awe of, for creating the internet and Skype and radio programs, Skype radio, such as this, and podcasts and YouTube and all the conferences going on and other radio programs. In other words, this kind of information is spreading around so much more than it ever had a chance to earlier. So, God bless it. We have a chance that more of the world population is waking up to the fact that there is a better way, and there's actually help coming to us if we will just open up to that and receive it and use it. So this is different than when John Keel was writing about the Mothman prophecies and all the other many things he wrote about. He did some excellent work, and he was sort of a forerunner, I think, a harbinger of more of awareness is coming to humans. He certainly spiked the curiosity of many people about many of the things he wrote about, including, of course, the Mothman prophecies. He helped to get people aware that, maybe there are other beings that we don't know about or we only get a little glimpse of, but maybe there's more to reality than we have realized. And indeed, there is. So he's been a very, very important contributor, well worth reading and knowing about. And now some of us are just simply carrying it further, opening up more and more. One of the things that is so impressive and moving to me that the hybrids talk about is how these other beings in the cosmos, whom they all describe as very unconditionally loving and understanding and caring, even the reptilian types that they are composed of, and that they all understand that all beings of all kinds in the entire cosmos are one. In fact, the whole cosmos is one. We are all part of the one creative source. So on these other planets, these other species of beings do not have separate religions like we do. They don't even need such a thing because they all understand and accept and admire that there is this one great creative source, and they're all part of it. We are all part of it, whether we realize it or not.
That's so beautiful the way that you just said that. Don't you agree, Phil? Like, it was just so beautiful the way you said. I mean, for our listeners too, who might think that's a little woo-woo, It's really not. I mean, the more you keep doing this research, the more that comes back up that this is what these higher dimensional, higher density beings uh, don't just believe in. They believe it as a faith. It's how they
Well,
live their entire existence by.
and yes, you're right. And as they have said to these hybrids, it's not a matter of our believing it. We are it. We
Hmm.
know it. Here on Earth, we have the big issue of do we or do we not believe in a God or Jesus or Mohammed or whomever, Krishna or um, but there in so many of these other civilizations out there in space, it's not a matter of belief. They just know that it is what it is. They feel one with us. And that's one reason why they come here sometimes and why they interact with some people, because they're one with us. One of the reasons why they want to know us as a human species. So not only are they very afraid of the humans, in that we have this terrific nuclear capability. I mean, it's just staggering. And they know that we could use it at any time. We could absolutely wipe out humanity. We could create tremendous harm to the earth. But not only that, but they're concerned that the radiation from nuclear proliferation would travel out not only through our solar system and affect all the other planets in our solar system, but it would extend way beyond that to other civilizations.
Well, even dimensions too, possibly.
Yes, they have said that, extending into even other dimensions. So that's one of the reasons why these encounters are happening. People are having extraterrestrial contacts because they're studying us and seeing what the effect of the radiation that we've already unleashed is having on us. So that's one of the reasons given for the animal mutilations that we hear about, cattle and other kinds of grazing animals, and that they are testing the organs of those animals to see how affected are they by our radiation and our pesticides as well. How is this affecting life on Earth? Because if it's affecting our animal life, our grazing animals from whom we get milk and meat, other substances, it no doubt is the radiation, the contamination, the pesticides are affecting human beings as well. So they're very, very concerned about this.
As they should be.
Yeah,
As they
Yes.
should.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, and we should be too.
We should.
Some of
I
us.
always said that, in 1945 when we dropped the bomb, or when we started exploding the bomb, I just had this image of some of the other civilizations going, "Oh no, the kids found the matches."
Yeah.
Yes, they're playing with matches and they don't know what they're doing.
That's correct.
They don't know the incredible harm it can cause. We know the harm it's caused on Earth from Nagasaki, Hiroshima, etc. But we haven't known, I believe, haven't known how far the contamination extends out into the universe and how it could be affecting other beings.
I think that's a big clue also too to why the UFO sightings and contacts increased so much once we discovered nuclear power and started using it in the form of weapons.
Well, it's so true. It really lines up, doesn't it? That after we set off the first atomic bombs at the end of World War II, lo and behold, 1947, we had UFOs seen over Mount Rainier area, and of course the Roswell crash, and 12 crashes in the New Mexico, Arizona, Utah area, and so on since then. Yeah.
Let's be real too. I mean, all that happened right at 47, and then all of a sudden, the CIA is created, and then we have the National Security Act signed into law. I mean, that doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. That seems like a response.
Yes, yes, I think that really all goes together. So we probably have been watched, observed by extraterrestrials for many, many centuries. But once we started unleashing this kind of power, it seems like they've rushed in and put particular focus on us and on individual people as well.
Okay, Barbara, so we're kind of coming towards the end. I wanted to start wrapping it up, but before we end, I definitely wanted to hear a quick story about one of your regressions where channeling had occurred within the session.
Yes, well, that's a very interesting thing. I'm always surprised by it and very, very moved and pleased by it. So, in other words, what we're talking about here is that once in a while, I'm regressing a person to an extraterrestrial experience. And while the person is relating, actually reliving one of those incidents, and they're right there in that experience with the extraterrestrials will suddenly say, "We have a message for Barbara." In other words, the extraterrestrials who did that encounter with the person, maybe years before or even decades before, they seem to know about that now while the regression is going on, and they see that as an opportunity to talk to me. So they give messages. It might be very simple, a message like, Barbara, thank you for doing this work. It's important that people who are having these experiences are becoming more aware of them, becoming more aware of us. Thank you for publicly talking about this and bringing this reality out to the public where you are able to do that. We honor that. We praise that. We are very appreciative of that work that you're doing. So basically, that's the type of message that they give. And this has happened, probably 20 or 30 times over these 25 years when I've been doing this regression work.
And you've actually been able to have conversations in real time with the beings through the abductee, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it does get to be a give and take where I can ask them questions, and they, through my client who's being regressed, will give the answer. And amazing thing too is that the whole energy in my counseling room where I'm doing this work, the whole energy changes. It becomes palpable and energy. It's a good energy. I like it. I'm moved by it. I'm thrilled by it. I'm deepened by it. I'm in awe. I mean, it's really a marvelous experience. And not only that, but one of my clients who I worked with for 11 years until she moved away, we did many, many regressions, probably 60 or 65 regressions. And also, she channeled an extraterrestrial being all of those years. So I had many conversations with this extraterrestrial being through the channeling she did in my office. And he said he was living on the binary star system called Antares. Well, we call it Antares. They don't necessarily have a name for it. But this wonderful being, whom I feel like I got to know for 11 years through that channeling, he gave so much information and perspective from the extraterrestrials' point of view. So, one thing I'm very aware of is that even if we don't know very much about them, or even if we don't even know at all that they exist, probably millions and billions of people don't even know that, but they know so much about us. So, whether it's remote viewing that they do or some other method, just a long range telepathic method, perhaps, they do know about humans. It's not that they're spying on us, but they're caring about us and they're very, very interested in us. It's hard for many of them to accept and even to imagine that so many people kill so many other people. You know, it's bad enough that we kill so many animals, but when we kill each other, that's just unfathomable to these beings. They would really like to see us become more mature about that and settle our differences in more decent ways. I am certainly all for that as well.
Well, are the these benevolent beings that I've been speaking with you? Are they? I'm sure they are aware that Earth is basically a fear factory, a fear farm. That we do the
Yes.
things that we do because we're being indoctrinated into it subconsciously through media or film or whatever it is. It's like we live in this society where we're generating fear for other beings to literally eat it and energetically. It's their food source.
Oh, I see. Well, there is a lot of rap, shall I say, about that, especially about the reptilians. Maybe there are reptilians who feed off our fear and negative, as some people say. There are also reptilians who have no agenda like that whatsoever. Uh, so there are many different species, I'm sure, far more than we can possibly know out there in the universe. And many of them, of course, do come here. And maybe some of them really do feed off the fear. I also think that there are agencies right here in humanity who like to instill that fear for their own purposes. As I was saying earlier, it sells. A lot of people, well, get off on being fearful and being in opposition. One of the problems, I think, is that our Earth is in the third dimension, so are we humans. And so the third dimension is one of polarity. So we have so many opposites here. We have positive, negative, light, dark, good, bad, evil, saintly. We have one team against another, one country against each other, one race against another. So we really have stark polarities. That's a big influence here on Earth with humans. It's not that way with some of the other civilizations out there in space. So part of that polarity here is that fear is the big booga booga. Fear gets a lot of attention. Fear can be used for so many different purposes.
You're definitely hitting on something that has a lot to do with karma, the wheel of karma, and I think this is one of the reasons why so many ET beings are so interested in us, and the fact that we have emotion. And it seems that a lot of these ET beings in our same density don't have the emotional capacity that we do. And then the fact that we live in this polarity, like you're saying, positive, negative, we have more chances for growth and more chances to stay ungrown. And it's a very interesting process to them. I mean, it would be like an extremely exciting episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians almost, to them.
Yes.
And
Yes, well, humanity is kind of like that. It's kind of an adventure. There's this attack, there's that fight, there's this company buying another company, there's this country against that country.
we can't overlook, though, the fact that I think that there are evil forces in humanity that want to manipulate black magic and to lure us into us accepting with our own free will to want to be addicted to fear and sex and these things of the lower nature. And I think that there's a bigger agenda behind that by more negative ET, like the parasitic type of ETs that maybe feed off that kind of fear. Because there's so much of it, they're so oversaturated that, in my opinion, it can't just be because human nature just wants it all the time. There's something feeding it that needs it.
That could be. I really don't know about that. That has not really come into my work, but it certainly is possible. But in addition to that, or in spite of that, we definitely see that that's a big feature here on Earth, that there are humans who are feeding off of fear. There are governments who are creating fear, even false stories, creating fear so that we'll go to war, so that we'll counterattack. So it's used politically here on Earth quite a bit. And I hope very much that humanity will eventually grow out of this need to be this way, to conduct ourselves this way.
I agree. It's got to be absolutely appalling to these races that the state that we're in. I mean, I'm sure especially the benevolent ones, I'm sure are just so sad that it's gotten to this point, and I'm sure that they want to heal everything and fix it all, but they can't fix it. We have to do it ourselves.
Yes, we do.
And I've always said, and I'll say this, for the rest of my life, and I've said it on the show a lot of times, Superman ain't coming. We got to do it ourselves.
Right. We would love to have a Superman come, but no, we have to wake up. We single individuals have to do what we can. So, I mean, at the very least, we can treat each other with respect. We can treat each other decently and kindly and lovingly. We can be as loving as we can. And, that tends to spread out in the area when we are like that. And we have that choice. Some people will not choose that, but those of us who can really need to. We really need to step up to the plate here.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Barbara. We really want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Such an incredible interview. Barbara's website is barbaralammft.com. And Barbara, are you still doing the crop circle tour in summer?
Well, I did them for 25 years, and I'm going to England this summer to continue my crop circle research, but I'm not leading a tour this summer. I might possibly another year, but I'm just taking a break from it this summer because I'm really, really busy doing other things.
Okay,
But the
understandable. Everyone needs to
crops.
check out Barbara's crop circle research as well. We got to have you on another time so we can just get deep into crop circles. Maybe we can do a live stream so you can show us some of your photos as well.
Okay, yes, that would be great. Yes, the phenomenon is still going on. It's going on all over the world, and it's still extremely special. And in my opinion, very much of it is made by the genuine source, that is, other intelligences from elsewhere, even though there are some undoubtedly made by human beings, but it's still a wonderful phenomenon. I think it's a total gift to humanity and perhaps even to the earth itself.
I would have to agree, especially
Me
with
too.
some of the intense, geometric patterns. Some that I've seen in your lectures that they are literally 3D. Ladies and gentlemen, when you see
Oh,
them,
yeah.
it takes on a 3D appearance. You don't need any special glasses for it.
I know.
It's absolutely incredible. So
Well, and it's so incredible to such a wonderful experience to go into the crop circles and sit down in them and feel these special energies in them and feel the sense of presence, a larger presence from whomever are the artists, the creators of the crop circles. I feel a tremendous sense of presence from above and all around me, as well as the really discernible increase in energy in the crop circles. It's just a blessed, wonderful experience.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Barbara, for coming on the show. We're definitely
Absolutely.
gonna
You're
have to
welcome.
have you on for next time, and yeah,
Okay, well, I've enjoyed it very much and so glad that you're bringing these things out to new people. And good for you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
thank you so much, Barbara. We'll talk to you soon.